Good afternoon, everybody. You're very welcome to this afternoon session, and it gives me pleasure to introduce the second keynote of today. It's going to be delivered by Professor Dr. Benno Werlen, who is the founder and holder of the UNESCO Chair on Global Understanding for Sustainability at the Friedrich Schiller University, Jena in Germany. Professor Dr. Werlen is a fellow of the World Academy of Art and Science and the Max Weber Center for Cultural and Social Studies. He's well known for his action-centered approach to human geography, and today his keynote talk is entitled "The Need for Paradigm Shift, Reshaping Sustainability Policy." With the current authoritarian developments in world politics, the UN Agenda 2030 and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals are in danger of being lost. A new paradigm shift in sustainability from the nature-centered logic to a culture-centered nexus, and from the top down to a bottom-up path to societal transformation is required, as proposed by the Jena Declaration. The Jena Declaration calls for a new strategy to achieve sustainable living everywhere, respecting cultural and regional specificities and aesthetics in dealing with nature. I'm delighted to present to you Professor Dr. Weber.
Yeah, thank you very much for this very kind introduction. And thank you very much, Damien, for inviting me and to his wonderful team making this conference happen here in Dublin. I'm very thankful to have the opportunity to talk to you about how we could reshape sustainability policy. And we need it for two reasons. The plan to achieve the goals of the 2030 Agenda is falling far behind. And the current state of global politics is not helping. We are living in an age where global problems are nationalized instead of seeing national problems in a global perspective. This is totally counterproductive, I think, for what you have to achieve on a global level. So we need to make substantial change to current sustainability policies if we want to master the big challenges the human community is confronted globally. The challenge humanity today is confronted with obviously are not abstract. Conflict, warriors, global crisis having an immediate and potential devastating impact on daily lives of billions of people around the planet. Just 3 weeks ago, on May 28, when I started to think more precisely about the content of this talk, I was confronted with a drastic event in the region where I grew up, back home in Switzerland. An event that is generally addressed as a natural disaster. Most of you are probably familiar with the rockfall and landslide from Blatten in Switzerland. A tiny, pretty village that disappeared in a couple of seconds from Earth's surface. It's located here, close to the Italian border, southwestern part of Switzerland. that's a quick summary of what happened in a few seconds. And this is the result of it. Where we had the pretty village before is now the constellation. The village is just a tiny little bit left over here. So all inhabitants lost their home by this so-called natural disaster, like many people do by similar events all over the world. Watching the presentations of the devastating impact of storms, floods, droughts, wildfire, pollution events, and so on, makes it first sight obvious to speak of natural disasters. With the pressing manifestation of the intensification of the frequency and magnitude of such events dominate the news globally, and most cases rightly addressed as the outcome of lacking sustainability. Watching the presentation of the decimating impact of the event at Blatten makes it first sight acceptable to speak of natural disaster. But is this really the correct wording? Of course, there are some good reasons to see in this a primary role of the natural sphere, and consequently to see the problem-solving competences predominantly in the natural sciences and technology. To clarify this question deeper seems to me in any case important when entering the core debate of this Congress, focusing on the effects of ICT on sustainability and the development of sustainable ITC systems. We need to know for what the system should be. However, let's have a look on another example from Switzerland on Münster. Not much less air distance of 18 miles. So that's if you want exactly the same alpine constellation, the same kind of rocks, the same constellation and so on. And the village is sitting on the result of a rockfall. And it does that for more than 1,000 years. And never been harmed again by a rockfall. In fact, the rockfall that led to that topography happened about 8,000 years ago, or 4,000 years after the end of the last ice age, to take the geological timescale. And what we can see, what happened in both cases, in Blatten and in Münster, was caused by the same natural forces and under quite identical circumstances, at least as seen in the perspective of geological timescale. One is called disaster, the other is called something else, at least not a disaster. Let's have a closer look at the difference between the two. Strictly speaking, a natural event doesn't endanger human facilities or human life itself, like in Münster about 8,000 years ago, and is generally not called a natural disaster. It's just called a natural event. As the reported news normally concentrate on the devastating consequences of human life and human infrastructure, wouldn't it then be more appropriate to talk about disastrous consequences of human action and the results of not adapted properly to the natural conditions? I think it does. But if you say that, then it's not anymore a natural disaster. In fact, these events are disaster because they touch on human life and infrastructure. Therefore, the disaster is not to be found on the natural side, but on the side of the actors and their unadjusted actions. Seen in this slide, there is no natural disaster at all, but much disastrous misassessment of natural conditions. No natural disaster, but not disaster forms of actions. It follows that all forms of naturalization of sustainability must then be avoided. We shouldn't turn the problem on the side where it's not. We should look at the problem where it is. If this conclusion is correct, it should have an important impact on our understanding of sustainability as a whole. It calls for reshaping of our constitutive perspective on sustainability and what sustainability is really. Furthermore, it requires a rethink of sustainability policy and research. First, we need to consider the agents, the ones they are not acting appropriately to the natural conditions. And then think about how they might affect the natural living context. In short, we need a double paradigmatic shift or a double shift of paradigm. First, from nature environment to cultural and societal realities, starting from where the problems emerges. And second, if we do that, then we need also to do a second change from top-down, from the top-down logic, from international agreements, from national programs of the government, and so on, logic of mastering to a bottom-up involvement. Of course, we need both, but so far the idea is that the solutions are coming from the top and have to apply it to down. And the Jena Declaration, as I will show shortly, is saying that's not enough. We have to foster the other side as well. We have to have the engagement, but for this we need to prepare certain conditions. Calling for a double shift of paradigm, identifying its implications and designing ways of implementing this is precisely the claim of the Jena Declaration. I want to turn now to the Jena Declaration and elaborate the points that are making clear why we should have also a triple shift, if you want, or at least from nature to culture and from top down to bottom up. And I will do that along 7 principles. The 7 principles are listed here. And the first one is a very simple one, but very often forgotten. The first one is the insight that sustainability is about more than ecology, respectively more than simply managing ecosystem and the environment. Much of today's thinking about sustainability is rooted in the idea that the human and the natural sphere are somehow opposed, that nature is simply our environment. But the opposite is true. With our body, we are part of nature. It's not our environment. We are in it, part of it. And the way we understand, relate to, and transform nature depends on our cultural background. Therefore, sustainability is in fact about us as part of nature, guided by cultural schemes of interpretation. The second principle is in the idea that true change towards sustainability can only be achieved if people begin to change their everyday routines and practices. All these activities are based on certain cultural background and a certain aesthetics. Sustainability is more than just a fashion. It's in fact a mindset, something that enables us to live sustainably based in and expressed by a certain aesthetics. Changing the aesthetic, therefore, is to see as the key action for achieving sustainability. We need to have other hierarchies of cultural values. We need to see things differently if we really want to reach sustainability. Here, especially, the voice of the arts and design can make a powerful contribution in establishing new ways of connecting with the world to find sustainable solutions for everyday problems in the most diverse context. This leads directly to the third principle. It's about the differences of top-down approaches in form of governmental advices, in form of international consensus and international programs. And giving solutions for all, independent of where they are living. But if you ever bought a one-size-fits-all shirt, you may know that one size only rarely fits all. And so it is also with the solutions that are advertised globally for everybody for sustainability. The same holds, as I said, for solutions to achieve sustainability. Top-down approaches based in international agreements like the SDGs or other programs that prescribe solutions for everyone hardly succeed. Instead, we need to find solutions that fit the specific conditions in different contexts. Or more precisely, we need to empower people to develop such solutions themselves. They know their context, they know their circumstances, they know their own culture, and so on. As a direct consequence of this, we can say, as a fourth principle, cultural and regional diversity shall be the starting point of any sustainability strategy. Everything people do is locally emplaced, historically situated, and culturally embedded. And if we don't respect that, we will never reach the real agent of societal transformation towards sustainability. It's difficult to convince people to make their lives more sustainable if the proposition doesn't find even the slightest anchor in their everyday world. So, successful sustainability strategy must embrace cultural and regional differences. The fifth principle is about the central role of the arts and of humanistic and social research. As I have said before, the arts can open new horizons, can develop new aesthetics. They can design and advance a different world, different ways of living. Likewise, the social sciences and the humanities can or shall help us understand the social and cultural dimensions of the current transformation. The Jena Declaration argues that the arts and social and humanistic research shall be basic for making living sustainably not only possible, but even enjoyed by everyone. The sixth principle highlights that the true bottom-up strategy involves a change of our ways of producing and applying knowledge. Many sustainability policies try to teach and tell others how to do things properly without knowing their cultural context, without respecting their expertise. According to the Jena Declaration, robust solutions must be developed together, and that there is a great potential for collaborative co-production of new knowledge in a transdisciplinary way. The basis for this is mutual learning, learning from each another. And finally, the seventh principle calls for the civic engagement. Genuine bottom-up policies enable to use the forces and the creativity of concerned citizens of all generations, but especially of young members of our global community. To make this engagement more effective, the Jena Declaration wants to develop a global platform to facilitate concerted action by all people around the world, whether they are researchers, teachers, officials, or concerned citizens. Not knowing much the content of your conference, but I could imagine that this could be a topic that is addressing the second part of your topic, developing ICT tools for sustainable policies. To reach these goals, for now, the implementation of the Jena Declaration is focusing on 3 program lines or action lines. The first one is arts, aesthetics, and design. And why as the first action line? Because it really goes on the bottom. It works on the way you are seeing things and directions how we can develop solutions. With this first line of action, we propose, as already mentioned, the role of the arts in the development of a new aesthetic for dealing with the natural as well as the cultural and the social world. Mindsets, daily routines and habits depend very much on everyone's cultural background, the applied schemes of interpretation. How we do things depends very much on what they signify to us, how we see the world, and also our place in it. I think these are the crucial points that you really have to respect if you want to change from the bottom up in a democratic way, ways of living without any enforcement and so on. The arts in all their forms are crucial for expanding mindsets, providing new perspectives on how to see things and ways of living, to mobilize artists of all forms of expression, music, fine arts, photography, film, performance, creative writing, poetry, numerical arts, architecture, culinary artists, and so on, for a deep social transformation is, of course, of core relevance. This leads to the second action line, learning from one another. And the point is, so far, most programs are about teaching, tell people how to do things in the right way. So that's another form of top-down. We have, in schools, we have the disciplines that have been decided that there are disciplines of schooling when national curricula have been built up in the second half of the 19th century, nearly across the whole of Europe. And they say rather unchanged so far. And the schooling is more or less a training camp for academics and researchers. We have from the beginning on the disciplines that are later on you find at university, many of them. And you are selecting people, in fact, for that, but not so much for the changing problems on your door, at your doorstep. So with the changing world, we also have to change the contents of learning and engaging. So the second program line focuses on learning, on ways of living, and engaging with teacher by establishing living labs, and that's the important point, to go out of school in living labs, having situations when there are learning problems in the real world as they occur to people in their everyday world. And not only, I'm saying not only also, but not only by learning abstract forms of knowledge. So establishing living labs as an important part of the curriculum at all levels for all ages. So starting from the primary class and then going up to university programs. And this because teachers are designed to share mutually what they know and learn with about 2 million pupils and students all over the world. So the biggest part, we have about 2 billion people on the planet that are in the young situation of learning. So this is the place where we really have to go into. It is those students who will make the decision about sustainability throughout the 21st century. And we need them all to know as much as possible and to care deeply about sustainability. Finally, civic engagement. Civil society organizations are at the core of the Jena Declaration's third program line. Their expertise and commitment will be used to catalyze deep societal transformation towards global sustainability. The role of civil engagement in social transformations can hardly be underestimated. Community groups, non-governmental organizations, charities, faith-based organizations, youth organizations, and many other groups in the third sector bring citizens together to engage for the common good. Civil society actors can play a vital role in raising public concern and creating pressure for change. They can amplify marginalized voices and offer unique perspectives that help innovate policy formulation and implementation at all levels of society. Through civil society organizations, many savvy and passionate citizens can be reached who are willing to tackle today's challenges at their doorstep. That's briefly the program points, and now just briefly on the background of the Jena Declaration. The Jena Declaration is based on the survey among internationally leading sustainability experts carried out by UNESCO chairs and by UNESCO Chair on Global Understanding for Sustainability, and sponsored by the Canadian Commission for UNESCO, the Canadian Social Science and Humanities Research Council of Canada, the German UNESCO Commission, the World Academy of Arts and Science, and the Club of Rome, together with a couple of other important institutions. Many of the experts we interviewed and we discussed later on the results are representing the International Science Council, UNESCO, the World Academy of Art and Science, the Club of Rome, the Academia Europaea, the International Council of Philosophy and Human Sciences, the International Geographical Union, and several international leading universities participated in the follow-up conference on humanities and the social sciences for sustainability that finally led to the Jena Declaration. The Jena Declaration is now a consortium of partners with several UNESCO commissions, but especially with 61 to 60, here are the 60 ones, the other one just joined yesterday, so we don't have his logo here. So it's including 61 project partners. We have about a little bit more than 1,900 signatories. That sounds not much, but they are distributed not evenly. There is, of course, a little concentration in Europe of about 1,900 individual signatories and institutional signatories, but they are covering all 5 continents, and I see them as seeds that can now bring to flourishment. They can grow at each part of the world. And they are covering 138 countries. So that's, if you want, the group of people together with the primary signatories and the group of ambassadors who try to bring this up as a form of a global movement that is starting from the bottom and reaching up to societal institutions and international organizations. The declaration wants to gather a highest possible number of signatories to put pressure on the leading sustainability agencies and bodies to strengthen the bottom-up logic of sustainability policies and research, but also the position of the arts and the role of the social sciences and the humanities, and especially their topics. Yeah. So let me conclude with some summary remarks. As described, an important prerequisite for achieving the goals of the Jena Declaration is to respect the cultural worlds, social and regional living conditions, and historical contexts of all people. So we have to meet the real actors of societal transformation with all the respect they deserve. We have to see them as competent agents. They know their living circumstances, but they don't have the tools and the means to implement their goals, or maybe they need some advice to change their goals or to change their tools. And that's the role of the science, to work with them and to help them to implement their ideas or to evaluate their ideas. Citizens shall not experience the change towards a sustainable future as a constraint, as a loss of well-liked habits. They should rather recognize it as a direct benefit, a benefit for themselves and not the abstract environment. They should rather, for their own safety, health, and cultural progress, from degradation to regeneration, but also for social cohesion and social inclusion. Let's understand ourselves as part of nature, guided by cultural principles that promote a balanced approach. This, I think, is symbolized by this woman that calms down the tiny Wallis black-nosed sheep after it was terrified by the loud noises and trembling ground caused by the rockfall at Platten. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Werlen. We have time for some questions.
Yes, thank you very much for your talk. I'm usually a great fan of what UNESCO is doing. I now heard first time, I must admit, from this Jena Declaration, and I have to say something critical about it. My critique comes from a basic question that is usually asked in the ethics of economics. Yes, there you can see the economic system as a game that society is playing. And the big ethical question is, where is the place of morality in this game? Is it in the actors or is it in the rules of the game? And the Jena Declaration seems to be clearly on the first answer. So it's all about the actors and not about the rules. And I think that this will not really help us to get out of the dilemma we are in with sustainability, or with the non-sustainability of our actions. I think we have to change the rule of the economic systems.
Oh, yes, of course. Okay, that's one way to see it from the economics. It's, of course, an important part. I wouldn't say that the rule is all on the side of the actors. My theoretical background is structuration theory, that the structures are structuring the actions, but structures can be changed by the actors. So it's not a dynamic form, it's not a fixed form of structuralism. What you are saying is the debate between structuralist and individualist. And that's not the point of the Jena Declaration. The point of the Jena Declaration is that if we think that we can change the world by changing the rules, then we make a lot of pressure and we make a lot of non-respectful approaches to the actors. We have to take them serious. And if we are saying scientists then come in and are discussing with the actors, everyday actors, the problem situation, then that is the point where the scientists have to remember them what the general rules are, and maybe also working on their change. So I wouldn't see that as a weak point of the Jena Declaration. There are other weak points, but this one not, I would say. And for the reason I said, it's a structuration that structures are mobilized through the agent and the agents are able to change the structures. And so you have this opposition between holism and individualism, or structuralism and individualism, not resolved, but there is a way out of it, a possible way out of it, I would say. There was another question over there.
Hello, hi. So thank you for the presentation. This is Henry from Italy. So when I was looking at your 7 principles, I got really kind of frustrated in a way. And we were discussing over lunch, at least about 2 of those principles. One is about the new generation working on Green Deal and software engineering for Green Deal and ICT that are hard to change their mindset, as we are hard to change our mindset. And I think what's your second principle in the list, I think that this is really fundamental. I was talking with a friend here, Patricia, and we say, you know, we are instructing students since 5 years in a program which is specific for software engineering and sustainability. And still we understand that, you know, change the practices, it's really human difficult thing, not only for people like, you know, me, which is already, you know, a certain age, but even for youngers. So when I saw that one, I say, oh yes, really. And another one that I really could understand very well from your principles, this number 4, cultural and regional diversity, that we were also discussing in lunch, that if we don't look at what is locally important, but with a global view, then we can change something in a country, in a place, but it doesn't mean that it's going to change or improve the system if there is no global understanding and global effort in making the change. So we were discussing about, you know, for example, monitoring or limiting the number of flights in a country. But if it doesn't happen on the other countries, then we are only shifting, you know, and we are not reducing. So just to tell you that after this talk, and I hope that this week we will be talking more and more about those principles, but at least 2 of them were really touching me because we were discussing 1 hour ago, and I can really understand how important and how difficult are to implement them. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, nothing is probably harder than to change routines and habits. That's a deep insight, I think, in psychology, social sciences, and so on. That's why I think we need to change. We have to get a step further back. And that's to change the aesthetics, the meaning of things to us. If you take the Green Deal and all these things, these are superficial, short-time politics. Solutionism, there's a solution for every problem. I mean, Marx said, humanity is setting itself only problems they can solve. That's, I think, as much problematic as just looking at short-time solution for problems that are not just short-time events. Their roots are lying far back. So we also have to go further back. And when I'm saying there's nothing harder or more difficult than to change routine and habits, that means these principles cannot be implemented in a generation. That needs much more time. Of course, I mean, changing a schooling system, for instance, is probably the hardest thing, is another hard thing. Because if you look at the logic of schooling systems, you have the ministries, at least for public school, that are paying for the books and so on, or they have a saying on the books. So until then, if they want another direction, they have first to convince the ministries, and then you have to look after the authors, and then you have the publishers, and that takes along that like 20 to 40 years to change. So, you know, but you have to begin somewhere. Or my point is after this discussion, with all the people we interviewed, was many of them are putting the finger on the problem of education, what they were calling the silos of knowledge, that all children and young people are they are confronted with silos of knowledge, and nobody's telling the interaction between the silos, and nobody is telling them how to apply these forms of knowledge. So learning how to apply should be an important part. And this can only be achieved, in my view, after these interviews and a lot of scientific work on it. I was not talking about the problem of interdisciplinarity today, but interdisciplinarity is not a solution for the big problems we have, because it remains a scientific definition of the problem situation. One discipline is saying this is our problem, and they are looking for partners to contribute to get the big money, to put it roughly. Transdisciplinary is to take a problem as non-scientific, define it, an everyday problem constellation, and then the scientific disciplines can come in, and if the everyday actors want to have that advice, to tell them what they would do from their position, but they don't have the final saying, perhaps. We need to have problems that are defined by non-scientists, otherwise we are running after scientific problems. And the world has also other problems where we can use scientific knowledge to solve them, but they are not strictly scientific problems, because they don't emerge of the disciplinary definition of the world. So that's very important. If you have interdisciplinarity, then we are still in another world than the problems that people are facing, at least the combination of problems they are facing. So we have to start from the place how everyday people are seeing their problems, and then we can say, as scientists, we can contribute to their solution. What was your first point? I've forgotten about it.
Well, when the cultural and regional
That's what you liked, but you disliked something.
when we do changes which are local, instead changes should be global.
Oh, I see. I think if people are starting at their place to think about how they can solve their problem, they will realize that today's problems and local places are interconnected globally. And for that, they have to contact other people that are locally engaged to exchange their experiences, to exchange their knowledge, and stimulate one another how to proceed. I think, okay, it depends how you're thinking. If you think that experts know everything better than anybody else, then this is an approach they can't convince. But I'm convinced, to come back to the economic perspective, markets can be created. And they are created not by economists, they are created by the buyer, the consumers. And that's very often, of course, there are other forms as well, of course, but consumers have the power to create markets, in fact. And I think local engagement can be so strong that it has a national impact or an overall regional or even continental impact.
There's another question over here.
Thank you, Benno, for a very interesting talk. I always like hearing talks from somebody who's from a different discipline than me and learn a new perspective. you kind of prompted the question that I'm going to ask in your answer to Lawrence, which is you saw some other weaknesses. So given that you know the people in this room are on your side, what do you think are kind of the limitations of this work, or where do you see the weaknesses?
Okay. Oh, shouldn't talk too much about it because I want your signature. No, I'm kidding. The weaknesses is how can you engage people for something that is something for themselves? And how can you do it properly if you are yourself an academic? How you can get out of your cage and fulfill the criteria the Jena Declaration is calling for. So that would need to have, first of all, the declaration translated in many languages. We have it translated in 14 or 18, I can't remember exactly, languages, but that's not enough, because there are lots of abstract concepts behind or used to address the content of the Jena Declaration. And everyday people, you can't reach them with abstract concepts. You have to transform them in storytelling, but you have to transform them in storytelling adapted to the local conditions, the local tradition. And that's very complicated. I mean, we don't have any money. Basically, we are working 2 people on that. And that's showing, okay, that's the university is ready to support this. UNESCO, a lot of people are approaching me and they are thinking that I can pay them money for a job I have to offer. They think that UNESCO has money. UNESCO wants money. They don't give money. And they want it from the States. And that's how they keep running their sub-organizations and headquarters in Paris. But even the UNESCO chairs, the university has to show that they have the money to run a UNESCO chair. There's not 1 cent from Paris involved. And nobody gets any money from it. They have their own people to pay. But they are giving us services, and they are asking you a whole list of requirements you have to respect if you want to use their logo. So that's the logic is. So I'm saying that not to blame UNESCO. I'm saying that to show if you have something that is bigger than national, all the financial system collapsing, because even the private companies are not able to pay somebody in another country if they don't have a seat in that country, for instance. And governments are not paying in other countries whatever it is. They are paying their own people to go there and to come back, things like that, but not. So that's, you have a lot of institutional barriers for the implementation of the Jena Declaration that is calling for an engagement of the citizens of the planet for global problem constellations and global problem solutions. The whole logic is against that. And that's why at the moment the nationalists, in my view, have such a success, because people are overloaded with that idea that they have to contribute to global problem situations. They want what they can think after 2 centuries of brainwashing is to think that they are part of a nation and the nation is the biggest it is, that is there. So the nationalization to the educational system is enormous if you look at it. Through history, through geography, to many of these disciplines. They have been put as disciplines of schooling exactly for that service, to strengthen national thinking, national beliefs, and national culture. That's how it is. But our problems, we cannot, Trump will have that experience. He will have all these people behind him, but the end they will all be against one another. And we will not have a solution of the most pressing problems that we only can solve on a global level. And the point is, the Jena Declaration, I can tell you, is an example what the problem is for such a project. I I had also organized the International Year of Global Understanding, where I had the idea that in 2008, that the future problem will be that globalization is going forward and people are continue to think in national or local categories and don't see the relation between the different levels. But it was nearly impossible to organize it. I had all the many international organizations, but the real movement was impossible to mobilize.
Thank you.
I'm going to try to squeeze in 2 more questions.
And
We'll be short.
sentence for each.
So thank you for the talk. Food for thought. I will bring home. I was initially inspired by what you said about learning, that we have 2 billion, if I remember correctly, a large global pupil population, so young generation to teach to or to influence in a way. But actually, we should also at the same time target the older population, so the decision makers of today. And then we should build upon long life learning to actually target specifically these people that make the wrong decisions now and tomorrow. Yes or no is fine.
No, of course, I mean, as I said, all, but especially the younger ones, because they have to live longer with the consequences of their decisions. So I think each generation is making its nest, and they have to live with what we are leaving them, and they have to go with it. And of course, also in a democratic system, you have to have all on your side, as many as possible on your side. And that means also the older and the decision maker, but the decision makers have reached their position by the thinking they applied. And if that thinking leads to a lot of problems, that kind of thinking will not lead automatically to the solution.
Learning, we should target those to retrain them.
As I said, nothing is harder than to change habits and routines. Yeah, of course we should, but difficult.
We have another question here.
I'm trying to keep it short. I'm very much in favor of the transdisciplinary approach. I'm also working at a transdisciplinary research institute. But when it comes to the concrete, what can we do? I'm more concerned about how in the face of, let's say, a YouTube advertisement where everyone is almost forced to buy Temu stuff all the time because you're bombarded with this advertisement, how arts and social and humanistic research can really help, because it's in a way a weak tool. If you say, oh, look at this beautiful flower, don't you want to go outside and enjoy nature instead of buying the next thing that you are really forced into buying almost? Yeah, do you have any maybe ideas on how these forces can become stronger?
Yeah, I mean, one big problem of transdisciplinarity is that the scientific career is paved with certain success. And what is defined as a success is the number of publications, the number of quotations and research money, basically. And transdisciplinarity is serving none of them. Transdisciplinary engagement. You can't publish at the same rhythm as somebody who is doing the guidelines of the discipline, because you have to engage with communities and you have to spend a lot of time with them and so on. And you cannot, if you publish for them, that's not counting as a scientific achievement. You see? So transdisciplinarity is undermining, is not foreseen in the description of a perfect scientific career. So my conclusion is the scientific career is about authenticity, about authority. You have to be representative of your discipline if you are a good scientist. You are an authority in your field. People believe you first. Maybe they do not, but First of all, they say, oh, he must know because he is successful, or she. And you shouldn't apply the same criteria to transdisciplinary work. Transdisciplinary work, it should be authenticity, that people believe the person from science, that they are really engaged in everyday problems and not only pretending for the scientific career. So that's a complication. The other one is, if I'm talking about arts, it's not taking the arts as they are, as a form of decoration of scientific conferences, for instance. The arts, I'm talking about arts that are mind changers, like in paintings, modern paintings, and so on. They make you think differently. That's the point. I really artists that are thinking deep and suggesting something deep, other visions of life, like Picasso or others, and electronic arts. And you have many fields where this happened. And you have more and more artists that are seeing their job not just mirroring the environmental policies, but transforming the way of thinking itself, establishing a new aesthetics in dealing with nature and social and cultural aspects. If you go to the partners of the Jena Declaration and check their website, there are some people that are giving you ideas how they are working and what they are doing and what could be a way of change.
I know that we'll be happy to listen to Professor Werlen all afternoon, and I think he'd be happy to talk all afternoon. But unfortunately, we have a schedule to follow. But for the moment, I'd like to thank him for a very stimulating and thought-provoking talk.
Thank you.